Somewhere in your family tree, there might be a story that nobody ever told you, a name that does not quite fit, a grandmother who lit candles on Friday nights but could never explain why, a surname that traces back to a country your family has no memory of leaving, a DNA test that came back with percentages you did not expect. For millions of people around the world, the question of hidden Jewish ancestry is not hypothetical, it is a mystery, sitting quietly in their bloodlines, waiting to be uncovered. The history of the Jewish people is, in many ways, a history of concealment. Not extinction, but concealment. Over centuries of persecution, expulsion, forced conversion, and assimilation, millions of Jews were absorbed into other populations. They changed their names, they changed their religion, they changed their language, and within a generation or two, the memory of who they had been was gone. But the clues did not vanish entirely. They survived in surnames, in geography, in family traditions that outlasted the reasons for keeping them, in medical conditions that cluster in specific populations, and now, in the DNA itself. This is not a video about proving that you are Jewish. Jewish identity is a matter of religion, culture, community, and in Jewish law, maternal descent. A DNA test cannot make you Jewish, and the absence of a result does not mean your ancestry is not there. But if you have ever wondered whether your family carries a hidden chapter that nobody talked about, here are the 5 most reliable clues and what they actually mean. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. Clue 1. The map. The first clue is not in your DNA. It is on a map. Where did your ancestors live before they came to where you are now? Jewish populations have been concentrated in specific regions for centuries, and if your family tree has deep roots in those regions, the probability of Jewish ancestry increases significantly. The largest and most genetically distinct Jewish population is the Ashkenazi community. They are descended from Jews who settled along the Rhine River in Germany and France around the 5th century, and later migrated eastward into Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Hungary, Romania, and the Baltic states. By the early 20th century, the vast majority of Ashkenazi Jews were concentrated in Eastern Europe. If your ancestors came from Warsaw, Krakow, Vilnius, Minsk, Kiev, Lviv, Odessa, or Budapest, that is a geographic clue worth investigating. But Ashkenazi Jews are not the only story. The Sephardic Jews descend from communities that lived in Spain and Portugal before the expulsion of 1492, and they scattered across the Mediterranean after being forced to leave. They settled in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, Bosnia, the Netherlands, Italy, and across the Americas. The first Jews to permanently settle in what is now the United States, arriving in New Amsterdam in 1654, were Sephardi refugees from Portuguese Brazil. If your ancestors came from Izmir, Thessaloniki, Istanbul, or any of the former Ottoman territories, those are Sephardi clues. And then there is the crypto-Jewish story, which is one of the most extraordinary chapters of hidden ancestry in human history. When Spain expelled its Jews in 1492, and Portugal followed in 1497, hundreds of thousands chose to convert to Christianity rather than leave. These Conversos became outwardly Catholic, but many continued to practice Jewish customs in secret, passing fragments of their faith down through generations so quietly that their own descendants eventually forgot the origin of the traditions they maintained. Crypto-Jews spread across the Spanish and Portuguese empires, including into what is now the American Southwest. In New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and Colorado, families have been discovered preserving Jewish-like practices for over 400 years without knowing why. If your family has roots in the American Southwest with Spanish colonial ancestry, this is a clue that deserves serious attention. Clue 2. The name. The second clue is your surname, though it must be handled carefully because surnames can be both revealing and misleading. The most famous Jewish surnames are the priestly names, Kohen, which is the Hebrew word for priest, and Levi or Levi, from the tribe of Levites who served in the ancient temple. These names are found across every Jewish diaspora community, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi, and they carry genuine genetic significance. Studies have identified a distinct Y chromosome marker called the Cohen modal haplotype that appears at high frequency among men with the surname Cohen, regardless of where their families lived. It is one of the most striking examples of a genetic signature linked to a specific surname and oral tradition anywhere in the world. Beyond the priestly names, Jewish surnames in the Ashkenazi world often follow recognizable patterns. Many were adopted in the late 18th and early 19th centuries when European governments forced Jews to take fixed family names. Names ending in Berg, Stein, Man, and Witz are common. For example, Goldberg, Rosenberg, Greenberg, Goldstein, Einstein, Rubenstein, Rabinowitz, Horowitz, and Berkowitz. Names derived from professions are also common, such as Cantor, the synagogue singer, Sofer, the scribe, Schneider, the tailor, and Kramer, the shopkeeper. And names derived from cities include Berliner, Breslauer, Prager, Vilna, and Warschauer. For Sephardi Jews, the surname patterns are different. Many carry place names from the Iberian Peninsula, for example, Toledano from Toledo, Cordovero from Cordoba, and Soriano from Soria. Others are of Hebrew or Arabic derivation, Ben Zaken, Ohana, Abacassis, Ezule. Many Sephardi surnames also survived among crypto-Jewish families in the Americas, sometimes altered beyond recognition over centuries of concealment. The critical warning here is this: many of these names are also used by non-Jews. A family named Goldberg could be Jewish, Lutheran, Catholic, or anything else. The surname alone proves nothing. What matters is the combination of the name with the geography, the time period, and the other clues on this list. If your surname appears on Jewish surname lists, do not assume anything, but do not ignore it either. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. Clue 3. The DNA. If you have taken a commercial DNA test and it shows a percentage labeled Ashkenazi Jewish, that is a very strong indicator. The major testing companies are highly accurate at identifying Ashkenazi ancestry because the reference panel is large and the population's genetic distinctiveness is remarkably high. Ashkenazi Jews are one of the most genetically well-defined populations on Earth, a product of centuries of endogamy within a relatively small founding population. But Sephardi and Mizrahi ancestry is harder to detect. Many commercial tests do not have robust reference populations for these communities. Instead, your results might show a combination of Southern European, North African, Middle Eastern, and West Asian percentages without labeling any of it as Jewish. If your ancestors came from Spain, Portugal, North Africa, or the Middle East, and you see that combination in your results, you could be looking at Sephardi or Mizrahi ancestry that the algorithm cannot categorize. The science behind this is genuinely fascinating. Multiple genome-wide studies have shown that Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews all share a common genetic origin in the ancient Levant, the area of modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. On the paternal side, Y chromosome studies show significant similarity across all Jewish diaspora groups, supporting a shared Near Eastern male origin. But on the maternal side, the story is more complex. A landmark 2013 study found that approximately 40% of Ashkenazi mitochondrial DNA traces back to ancient European women rather than the Near East, suggesting that the founding fathers of the Ashkenazi community were Near Eastern men who married European women. Jewish ancestry is rarely a straight line. It is a mosaic. You could carry a paternal lineage that traces directly to the ancient Levant and a maternal lineage that traces to prehistoric Europe, and both would be genuinely Jewish in their history. The founding of the Ashkenazi community like the founding of many diasporic populations, involved men who migrated from one region and married women from another. Over centuries of relative genetic isolation, this mixed founding population developed into one of the most genetically distinctive groups on Earth, a population so tightly defined that modern algorithms can identify Ashkenazi ancestry with remarkable precision. But that same precision does not extend to Sephardi or Mizrahi ancestry, which is why so many people with genuine Jewish roots receive DNA, results that leave them more confused than they were before they tested. If you have taken a DNA test and uploaded your raw data to a platform like GEDmatch, look for clusters of matches with people who have significant Ashkenazi or Sephardi ancestry. If you share DNA segments with multiple Jewish individuals, especially on the same chromosome segments, that is strong evidence of shared ancestry, even if the algorithm did not flag it. Clue 4. The medical history. Certain genetic disorders appear at much higher frequencies in Jewish populations, particularly among Ashkenazi Jews, than in the general population. If your family has a history of specific conditions, and you have other clues on this list, the medical evidence can strengthen the case considerably. The most well-known Ashkenazi genetic conditions include Tay-Sachs disease, Gaucher disease, Canavan disease, and familial dysautonomia. The carrier rates are striking. Among Ashkenazi Jews, approximately 1 in 15 people carries the Gaucher disease mutation. For Tay-Sachs, it is about 1 in 27. For familial dysautonomia, 1 in 31. These rates are dramatically higher than in the general population. There are also inherited cancer syndromes. Ashkenazi Jews have a significantly elevated risk of carrying mutations in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, which increase the risk of breast, ovarian, and prostate cancers. Approximately 1 in 40 Ashkenazi Jews carries a BRCA mutation compared to roughly 1 in 250 in the general population. For Sephardi Jews, the carrier rate is approximately 1 in 140. The important caveat is this: the absence of these conditions means nothing. Many people of Jewish descent carry none of these mutations, and the presence of these conditions does not prove Jewish ancestry because they can appear in any population, just at lower frequencies. But if your family history shows a pattern of these specific conditions, especially when combined with other clues from this list, it is worth discussing with a genetic counselor. Clue 5. The traditions. The fifth clue is the most human and often the most haunting. It is about the things your family did that nobody could explain. Throughout history, Jews who were forced to hide their identity preserve fragments of their faith through small, quiet practices that could be maintained without detection. Many of these practices outlasted the memory of their origin. Families passed them down for generations without understanding where they came from or why they mattered. In some cases, those fragments are the only evidence that survives. Ask your older relatives about any practices that seemed unusual or unexplained. Did your grandmother light candles on Friday evening without any clear religious reason? Did your family avoid pork or shellfish without being Muslim or having a medical reason? Did anyone cover mirrors when someone died or tear their clothing as a sign of mourning? Was there a tradition of resting on Saturday even though the family attended church on Sunday? Did anyone ever refer to a relative as Cohen or Levy without knowing why? Was there a whispered story about a hidden grandmother or a family secret that was never fully explained? In the American Southwest, the historian Stanley Hordes spent years documenting Hispanic families in New Mexico who maintained practices that were unmistakably Jewish in origin, such as Friday night candle lighting, avoidance of pork, Saturday rest, and specific mourning rituals. These families had been Catholic for centuries. Many had no conscious awareness that their practices had anything to do with Judaism. But when DNA testing became available, many discovered Sephardi Jewish ancestry tracing back to the Conversos, who crossed the Atlantic with the Spanish colonizers over 400 years ago. One family's grandmother always told her children, "We are not like the others. We come from the hidden ones." Nobody understood what she meant until a DNA test revealed Sephardic ancestry, and the family's crypto-Jewish lineage became clear. 4 centuries of hiding, and the grandmother's words were the last thread connecting the family to a truth they had almost lost forever. What this means, and what it doesn't. If you have found one or more of these clues in your own family, what you have is not an answer, it is a beginning. A geographic origin, a surname, a DNA result, a medical history, a family tradition, each one alone is suggestive. Together, they form a picture that may point toward ancestry that was deliberately hidden, accidentally lost, or simply never spoken about. But approaching this discovery requires both curiosity and respect. The people who carried this DNA were real people who made real choices under impossible circumstances. They converted to save their lives. They hid to protect their families. They assimilated to survive in societies that had demonstrated, repeatedly and violently, what happened to those who did not. The silence in your family tree is not emptiness. It is the sound of survival. Jewish identity cannot be determined by a DNA test. It is defined by religion, culture, community, and law. But the genetic and historical evidence of where your family came from is yours to explore. And for millions of people around the world, that exploration leads to a chapter of their family's story that was written in secret, passed down in fragments, and is only now, after centuries of silence, beginning to be read aloud. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. Thank you for watching. If you want to go deeper, the next video on your screen is one you will not want to miss. I will see you there.